also chairing the session on species boundaries. And I think it's really true that our view of what is a species is shaped by what we study. So studying lupins, my view of a species is pretty gray. So here we go. Lupinus circumscription challenges, indiscriminate outcrossing, and sheer numbers of taxa create the nightmare known as lupinus. I say nightmare, frankly, because I've been trying to get people to help me with Jepson and FNA treatments for literally decades, with nobody really wanting to help. So I started all this stuff in the early 80s and just got my edited treatment back 3 days ago from Florida, North America. So it's a long haul. Okay, so there's one thing that most people really agree upon, and that's what is the genus Lupinus? I mean, hey, it's a great genus, pretty recognizable. Species boundaries, something else. Okay, so, I mean, I was a biology teacher for 40 years, and, we were trying to teach our students that our taxonomies are supposed to be phylogenetic. They're supposed to be, the organisms in one rank are supposed to be more closely related to each other than other species. So in Lupinus, the evidence for phylogeny is not always clear or ever clear. The molecular evidence so far for species boundaries has not solved problems in Lupinus, and morphology is incredibly variable. The current thoughts by the people who have been studying this is Lupinus is a recent genus undergoing adaptive radiation. Gene flow, we know, is taking place between lupin taxa and certainly, obviously, among populations. And what we've seen so far is the molecular and morphological evidence don't always track. They don't always, give you the same answers. And probably because of what is called reticular evolution, where you're actually getting gene flow to not the closely related species. So this results in what some of us call, instead of the black and white taxonomies where you've got clear species boundaries, you actually get, quite a bit of gray. So there's a couple of reasons for that in Lupinus. Its nomenclatural background is ridiculous. In North America, there are over 1,000 names that have been ascribed to lupins, and that's not even all. There's more than 1,000. More than that for basonyms. And then the synonymy is truly a nightmare. And remember, the synonyms for a taxon is an alternative name for whatever circumscription position and rank for that taxon. So if you look it up online and Google a stupid word, it says, the synonym is for the correct name. Well, there's nothing. Who says what's correct? What it is the name that's accepted, and what name is accepted is totally dependent upon our taxonomic interpretation. So for lupins, there's so many names and so much variation that it has been a huge challenge for me to circumscribe the species boundaries. So look at this. This is a transparency I used in 1988 to present to my thesis committee at Berkeley what in the heck I was trying to do with Lupinus arboreus group, which I unfortunately had to stop that work. But I was looking at all these names and all these groups and looking at that point, the past taxonomists who grouped them all in completely different species complexes, varieties, and I was just starting out, and I remember my first class, and I had not really realized that people had not, I'd been teaching biology for 15 years and went back to school at Berkeley, and I had not realized that people didn't really agree upon what in the heck was a species and how you figure out those boundaries. And this was oh my God, look at this. And by the way, I did start growing plants, and I was told at that time, we should be looking at just the molecular stuff, and, growing plants was old hat. And I'm glad to see now that, as we talked in our cryptic species talk last time, that we're trying to get molecular evidence and morphological evidence and use them both to figure things out. Well, anytime I've actually looked to see if there's a new lupin, like when I looked at, what I thought was a new lupin on South Fork Mountain, well, of course, green, of course, I'd already named it. I mean, Green or Heller or C.P. Smith. So with more than 1,000, several hundred names out there, somebody probably has named a lupin, and one of the reasons things get lumped is that people like me who write keys can't make a key work, and you actually have to key it out 5, 10 times in a key. I mean, I think my key for F&A is hundreds of choices, and most people who teach in floristics or something, they're going to look at something like that and go, oh no, we're not going to take students through this key. So I hope by this time I'll be able to have, you're not supposed to be able to read this, by the way. I hope by this time I would be able to have turned in the change in the E-flora for Jepson, but because I just got the F&A stuff back, I didn't want to do that. But in California, in the Jepson E-flora, there's going to be 70 species, 43 variety, and 14 changes. And the changes, are basically lumping things like a bunch of the Excubitus varieties into alpha-frons, which, by the way, Jepson did a long time ago. I did not have to do any work because there was a name already out there. 352 synonyms for California. For North America, 89 species, but 148 taxa. That means there's all these varieties, right? So for the flora of North America, I did the perennials, Rhonda did the annuals, and for what I did, 59 species, 108 taxa, and so there they are. So each one of these 108 species has between 1 and hundreds of synonyms, that you're having to look at. Here's the annual, either 30 or 29 species, depending upon if I can get Rhonda to agree with me on one of them, and 7 taxa, 37 taxa, which means 7 varieties. So who I am, I've been up here on the stage almost every year and as an ecologist, because what I do is field work, which is how I shaped my vision of the species. So I have been visiting this with my trusty dog, whichever one was alive at the time, since it's been so long. Visiting these species in the field, visiting herbaria, and the incredible benefit of having CCH and CNET and all the E-floras. Wow, you don't know how lucky you are with the people who are just starting out to be able to get at your fingertips elevation and these notes. Wading through this nomenclatural and circumscription confusion with Lupinus, which has been ridiculous, and then writing these keys. And I will say, I've taught a lot of lupin workshops, like this one up in the corner up there that I did in Idaho that Barbara sucked me into. And every time I've taught a lupin class for Jepson, and Linnea's been trying to get me to do for Chico, I have learned so much, because what you're doing is teaching people who are in the field who are going, well, no, how about this, and how about that? And of course it just shows more shades of gray, and not the one that everybody thinks about when you say that. So, okay, so what's going on? Lupins, especially the perennials, they cross-pollinate. They're generally bumblebee pollinated, although there are lots of bee species, like up to 29 species that have been recorded. They don't have nectar. This slide has nothing to do with anything except I think it's interesting. Honeybees, and I've asked this question, Robin Farp has passed on, and the people that have kind of taken his place haven't answered me, but often when honeybees go in there, they actually don't get the style to hit them, so they may not be very effective, and bumblebees have much stronger legs. So I'm a real native bee enthusiast, especially for looking at our species, our native species. So back to the genus Lupin, they're pretty clear. The upper petal, the banner is outside the lateral and the wings, and obviously banner, wing, and keel. The filaments are fused, 5 long filaments with short anthers and 5 short with long. Only in the West, however, do they all have these palmate leaves. If you're doing Florida, North America, or doing South American lupins, you can see that many of them have simple leaves. The first time I worked in the herbarium, I remember going, I went up to Jim Hickman and I said, "What is this that I'm filing?" He said, "Teresa, it's a lupin." Oh my God. So, some characters that help delineate lupin taxa. The worst is the stupid hair business. Hair on the banner back, the keel, the wing. And you guys have to look at the plant, the young buds. If all you're looking at is old herbarium specimens, all that hair just disintegrates. The leaf hair on the surfaces, the persistence of flower bracts, that's pretty good. The position of leaves, whether you actually have calling leaves or basal leaves. And I know it's difficult for most people to figure out the annual perennial thing, but annual perennial shrub, and actually whether it's low growing or not. I remember Lincoln Constance telling me to go up and look at that Lupinus constantia, and if it's just some stupid hairs that separate it, he wanted it dumped. And I said, no, and of course it's a really nice taxon. So again, the hairs on banner back is showing you hairy keel, showing you Glaber's keels. All of these, when you guys collecting these things, make sure you put some in the pocket and if possible, rip some of those wings off so you can see them on the sheet. Flower bracts are really important, whether they're actually still there at flowering time. Whether you have just basal leaves, whether you have just calling leaves, whether you have basal and calling leaves. There's only one that actually has a fantastically huge stipule, Lupinus fulcratus, but leaf-like stipule, that's what a leaf-like stipule looks like. You find, and this is why some of these classes are so great, that you really can't key something out until you already know it, because you got to know the characters. So, big challenge. I mean, look at the difference in these upper leaf surface characteristics. They're pretty different on these, and most of these are nice and clear. I'm not showing you as much of the gray stuff. Characters, habit. There's different habits there. I was just going to very quickly look at 3 different groups: the Lepidus group with 10 varieties, Argentius with 14 varieties, and the Albicaulis group. Lepidus is bract persistence gets you. And the habit, here on Lepidus, what I've shown you, I don't expect you to read this again, but on most of those, on the whole group, there are 49 synonyms, and, on just one like lobii, there's 16, so somebody thought there were 16 species instead of just one. Argentius, 106, so there were 14 varieties of Argentius. And these were at one time, of course, considered separate species, but there was so much gray, it was really hard to differentiate them. So 106 different names, these small flowered lupins. Look at this, our Lupinus arbustus, which most of us love because of this one character, the wing hair, but there were 28 species people thought were Lupinus arbustus. This whole group here, the Formosus albicaulis group, that Elmrai, Proceus, all these guys, they're all alike and could be all one species with many varieties. So I just kind of have to say that you didn't get any solving of lupins. Anybody who's taken my class relaxes when they can't key something down because they can go, oh, it's in the gray area. And is it because the key's bad? Well, I have the key as good as I can make it. It's really because, frankly, there is so much gene flow, and there's so much all adapted to these open, kind of disturbed conditions, that these boundaries are just plain fuzzy. Maybe we ought to accept that. So, Jim, bless him, he got me into this in the 80s and asked me to do lupins, and I said, sure, not knowing that, the first 100 people turned him down. Larry, who we went on field trips for years, and these 2 men taught me so much. Lincoln Constance, who kept me straight on what I was doing, and Ledyard Stebbins in his retirement, constant calling me and talking to me and giving me quite a bit of encouragement and frankly defending me when people didn't like what I did. And Barbara Erder, who was my mentor at Berkeley when I was there. She was incredible and still is in helping me deal with nomenclatural and circumscription challenges. John Struther, who I only took one class from him in nomenclature, and when we were all PhD students, the first class, he gave us all F's on the first exam, just to get us any arrogance out of the way. And if you know him, that's just his type. So I started this, in 1986. There's my kids, my husband, and when my husband has passed away during an auto accident, I ended up having to leave Berkeley, but my kids, this is them now, this is them there, and you can see some time has passed. And I want to thank them because, if you're going to have a family, be a botanist, and I taught full-time for 45 years, it's a handful. So you need the support of people behind you. So thank you very much. Any questions?